Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to pick up stitches. Now my little sample here is really small, so obviously it'll be quick and easy for me. But if you have to pick up something like 50, 80, 100 stitches, it can become a little daunting and scary, and you want to make sure you pick them up all evenly wherever you need to pick them up. Now in my sample I have different things going on. I have a rib across the bottom and across the side because sometimes we need to pick up across ribs, and sometimes we just have plain stocking stitch, so nothing fancy to show us how to pick it up or any different elements. Anyway, so first thing you need to do is, let's say I need to pick up 80 stitches on the side here. Well, what I would do just to make it less scary is I would use some markers and I would fold this in half. So if I need 80 stitches here, I'm going to fold this in half and I'm going to put a marker here. And I know that up to this point, I need to have 40 stitches here and 40 stitches there. So that's a little better, but that's still a lot of stitches to worry about. So I'm going to fold it in half again. I'm going to fold half of the half in half. And I know I'm going to put another marker that up to here I need to have, I'm going to have 20 stitches here, 20 stitches here, and then I need to do the same thing on the other side. So I know I need 20 stitches in this bit, 20, 20, 20, and there we go. I have 2, 4, 6, 80 stitches that I can pick up. It'll make them more evenly spaced out and it will make it a nicer finish. And it's also less daunting to know 20 stitches. It's easier to count 20 than 80 and then have to rip out the whole 80. You do 20, it works, and then you have 18. You only need to rip out 18 and not everything else, which is kind of nicer and easier. Well, for my sake right now, I'm going to take these out because I really don't need them, and it's just a sample, so I don't need to know how many stitches I'm picking. Now a pattern will usually say pick up and knit. Well, it really means you have to pick them up and knit them as you're picking them up, not just, hey, here you go, just pick up a few stitches and I'm ready to go. No, that's just picking them up, which for socks or some other places it might be okay. But when they say pick up and knit, they really want you to get your working yarn, and I'm going to use a different color. Get your working yarn and pick them up and knit them. So there's different ways of doing it. So let's say if I have to pick them up and knit across this top where there is no rib, no nothing, and I'm just picking up and knitting. I want to look at the integrity of the stitches, and you see the V that they talk about often in knitting. Well, I'm going to want to go inside that V there. So I'm going to want to come right in there, and there, and there, and I'm going to go right through to the other side. So I can even go through just my 2 legs. No, I don't want to go through my 2 legs because my 2 legs are not in my V's. So I'm going to go right through this and make sure I have a whole bunch of stuff here, but that's okay. I want to go right through here, and that'll keep it a smooth and seamless transition. So when I do that, I want to not start here because then I'm missing my first stitch that's kind of rolling in here. I really want to kind of unroll that and look for that first stitch right there, and I'm just going to go ahead and knit it. So it's kind of like I'm pretending this is already on the needle, and I'm going to pretend this is my left hand needle, and I'm holding on to this. I'm going to hold on to my working yarn with this hand, the tail, so it doesn't come undone, and I just knit it. So I look for my next V, which is here, and I go right into it and I knit it. So I pick up and knit the stitches I need to pick up, and I go to my next V, which is here, go all the way through, and I knit it. And I'm going to do that all the way across. and it'll give me a really nice row of picked up stitches that'll be seamlessly integrated to my other part of my knitting. Okay, so I went ahead and picked up my 20 stitches and I knit 2 rows to show you how smooth that transition would be between the 2 colors and how well they blend in with one another. Now, obviously, if you're going to have to pick up stitches that are running parallel to the ones that are already below, ideally, I wouldn't bind them off, just because you do end up with a ridge along the back. I don't know if you can see it too well, but there is a bit of a ridge here, the seam, I guess we could call it, along the back, which might be bothersome for some people in the fabric. But if you did do it, this is pretty seamless and nice and smooth, and it works really well. Okay, now let's say we had to pick up the stitches along the side, not the top. So this is how I would pick up the stitches on a stocking stitch. And then if we have a garter or any other kind of funky stitching. Again, I was lucky here because I was just picking up 20 stitches, which is what I had before, so it lines up really nicely. Let's say you need to pick up 18. Well, at one point you're going to be -1. So sometimes what I would do is I would pick up the 20 and then just do an SSK or a knit two together, or SSK here, knit two together here, or something to get rid of the extra stitches. It'll make it look nicer and smoother. So picking up on the side, if I have a stocking stitch, so let me grab another needle and I will show you. So you can, depending on how many stitches you need to pick up, this is where you can actually play and see, do I pick up every row? You can pick up in every row. So I have 1, 2, 3, like, do I pick up every row? You can see them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or do I pick up every other row, or every other one times every row, or sometimes every other row, depending on how many stitches you need to pick up. Now we can roll it all the way over to see that first row, but in this first row it's harder to see your rows, especially on stocking stitch. When you've got garter, it's different picking up stitches here, and you'll see why. You just pick it up right in that knobbly knob and it makes it really nice and seamless. So like if you're doing mitered squares and they say you have to come and pick up stitches, I'll show you, it's just literally picking up the loop that's there, and it gives you a really seamless transition between garter and, garter and garter. So let's start over here, and I'm just going to come, I know this row I'm coming out of already because my working yarn is there, so this is my first row, and I try and always have at least 2 legs, because otherwise it gets kind of loopy goopy and we don't want that. So I always try and make sure I have 2 legs, and I just pick up and knit. Again, picking up and knitting. So if I come here, I only have 1 leg, not what I want. So I'm just going to come in a little bit more in my stitch, and now I have 2 legs, and I can go ahead and knit it. And I'm going to go all the way down, and I'm actually going to use this row to follow and find my way and make sure I always have 2 legs, or sometimes more, which is okay. It'll be solid. I'm just going to go right across, in and right across, right through that whole stitch. So you want to have at least 2 legs. If you have more, like I have here, that's okay. The more you have, the bigger the seam though. So that's something you need to keep in mind. If you have a lot of stitches, you have a bigger seam. If you have less stitches, but it's a pretty solid pickup. If I have less stitches, let's say if I went ahead and did this one, I have less of a seam, but it's not as solid. Sorry, that's a little tight. So let's say I only pick up the front loop. I'm doing different things here just to show you. Notice, oops, maybe I should do a few more just to show you better. Just the front loop, one leg. Okay, so I've done a couple, done 4. So this is just the one leg. Notice how big those holes are. And this is when I had more, when I had the full stitch. I find it's a lot more solid and less holey and more reliable. So I kind of like doing that technique better. I'm just going to take those out and come back and pick up my full stitch. But again, it does give you a bigger seam. So if you're really concerned about that, then just pick up the one leg. If it's a loose, lacy kind of something, then it doesn't matter. If you just pick up the front leg and it's lacy, it'll go with the rest of the project that you're working on. Okay, I have one more in the stocking stitch section, and there we go. I've picked up my stitches, nice and solid, and they look great. Okay, so now I'm in the section where I have a bit of a rib garter. So like I said, we don't want to go into the loop in the holes here because it'll make it very loopy and loosey-goosey. We actually want to go into the knots that we see. So it's very easy to see how many stitches I'm picking up here. I'm picking up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to pick up 8 stitches. Let's say I needed to pick up 10. So I am going to cheat, and I'm going to every now and then come and grab one in the middle between the 2 knobby knobs. So let me show you how I would do that. I need to pick up 10. So I'm going to come right in here and grab just one strand of the knot. Because it is a knot, it's tight enough that I can get away with just one strand, which is what makes it a very small seam and nice. So just come and go ahead and I knit it. Again, we're picking up and knitting, right? So I come to the next one, come here, I pick up and I knit. That's 2. Oops, sorry, the focus. It's tricky because you don't want to split the yarn. 3. And now I'm going to come and pick one up in the middle because we had said we need a 10, right? So I'm just going to come in here and to make sure I don't just have one leg though. Remember, one leg makes it too loose. I want to make sure I have 2 legs. 3, and then I'm back into a knot. 4, and I'm going to try and not pick up in the middle one after the other time. So I'm going to do another 2 or 3 stitches. 4, 5, 6, and now I'm going to come and pick up in the middle 2 legs or more, but I really just want 2 legs. 7, 8, oops, 8, well, I'm running out, 9, and I'm just going to come and create a 10th stitch here because I said I needed 10. So that's the other thing. When you're picking up stitches, no one's really going to pay very close attention to how you pick them up. It's more so the spacing of them than anything else. So here we can see it looks pretty good, and here it's pretty good too. So both of these work. And on the other side, you can see there's a bigger seam on the stocking stitch side than there is on the garter or the rib side. Okay, I'll do a few rows and show you how that looks. Okay, so I've knit a couple of rows on this other side and you can see what it looks like. So we have done where we pick up at our bind off, and it's fairly seamless. And we've done it on the side, whether it's a stocking stitch or rib side. And there is a seam on the top here where we did the bind off and we picked up, and there's a seam, and there's a seam on the stocking stitch, but not so much on the rib, on the garter side. It's pretty smooth and less seamless. Now, that's really what someone is saying when they say pick up and knit. That's really what they want you to do. They pick up your stitches and you knit them as you go along. But I have seen some people who don't like to do that and who like to pick up their stitches first and then knit them. So what I would recommend for that is get, depending on how many stitches, of course you need to pick up, get a double pointed needle. It works because you can pick them up always with the right side facing, and then after you pick them up this way, you can just go ahead and knit them off the other end. You can also do this with a cable if you have a lot of stitches you need to pick up. And again, what you want to do, if it's easier, in this case, I just come in and I come in from the back and I just pick up, oops, without splitting it, I pick up the stitch. This was my cast on, so it's a little different than the other ones because it was a twist. Well, I cheated on my cast on. I did twist it up to point, and then I ran out of tail yarn, and so I did a knitted cast on. So I did a real mishmash here. But I'm just going to go ahead and pick up that one loop because it is a twisted cast on. It's got a little bit of give, but it's also tight enough that I can get away with a loop. So I can just pick them up. Now, the other thing to notice, or to note, or to comment on, is I'm using a needle that is slightly thinner than the one I'm going to be using to knit. Why? Because as you're picking up, it's tight. Whereas when you're picking up and knitting, you're giving it slack by actually knitting the yarn through. But right now we're not giving it any slack. So it's going to be very tight, and especially if you want to use your regular size needles. So it's easier if you use a smaller size needle to pick up your stitches. And I'm just going to pick up as many, you just pick them up. Anyway, you get the idea. You pick up your stitches and then you're going to come and knit them. When you're knitting them, depending on how you pick them up, whether you pick them up from, let's say, back to front, or front to back, whichever was easier is what you're going to follow through with while you're picking them up, right? You don't want to break your head trying to figure it out. So sometimes you pick them up from front to back, and sometimes you might pick them up from back to front. So whatever it is you do, when you're knitting them is when you're going to sort them out so you don't have any twisted stitches. So you're ready here. And because I did pick all of them up from back to front at the beginning, I know I can just go right ahead, and now I'm knitting. But this knit row does not count as a row. This is part of the pick up and knit. So this isn't an extra row or anything else. This is still part of the pick up and knit. It's just we pick them up with one needle and now we're knitting them. And we're just going to go across. I'm just going to try and get to the ones that I twisted. But I always want to make sure that my yarn, my right leg is in front and my left leg is in back, always. And that way I know my stitch isn't twisted. If my right leg is in the back and my left leg is in front, which I will be coming to shortly, you know your stitch is twisted. So for example, in this case, my right leg is in the back and my left leg is in front. So I know this stitch is twisted. I can either take it off and reposition it so it's no longer twisted, or if I want to go a little bit faster, I can just knit into the back. Again, this stitch is twisted, so I can knit into the back of it and that'll straighten it out. It's twisted, and this one is twisted, but this one isn't anymore. My right leg is in front and my left leg is in the back, so I can knit it through the front. I didn't pick them all up, but it gives you an idea. And then that's how you would do that. If you want to pick them up first, use a smaller needle, and then you knit across, and that still counts as your pick up and knit section. All right, I hope this was helpful.